What if I told you your child might not be overreacting, even if it looks like it, even if it feels like it? What if your child is actually experiencing things more intensely than other kids? If you've ever watched your child fall apart over something small, take little things personally, or shut down when they feel like they've done something wrong, and you've thought, why is this so big for them? There may be a reason for that, and it's something most parents have never even heard of. So go ahead, pull up a chair, get comfy, because you're going to want to hear this one. Are you overwhelmed by constant meltdowns, defiance, or challenging behaviors? Are you longing for peace in your home? You're in the right spot. I'm Jamie, mom of 7, counselor, parent coach, and wrangler of big emotions. I've learned how to calm the chaos and build connection, even when things feel like they're falling apart. If you're looking to connect with your child, find effective parenting tools that honor your family values, and understand your child's unique wiring, you found it here. So pour that coffee, find a quiet spot if you have one of those in your house, and let's get started. Okay, so I said it. What if your child isn't overreacting? I know it looks like it. I know it feels like it. But what if you're seeing something that isn't too much? What if it's just too much for them? Have you ever noticed a small correction that turns into tears? A simple no that feels like rejection? A look, a tone, and suddenly everything spirals out of control. And you're left wondering, why does my child take that so personally? Or why does this feel so intense every single time? And if you're really honest, it can be confusing, frustrating, and sometimes even a little heartbreaking to watch. But what if your child isn't being dramatic? What if their brain is actually experiencing rejection more deeply than other kids do? There's a name for this, and it's called Rejection Sensitive Dysphoria. And for many kids, especially those with ADHD, DMDD, emotional dysregulation challenges, this could be the missing piece that finally helps you understand those big emotional reactions. I know when our child's psychiatrist explained it to us, it really helped us see the world through a lens that made more sense for what he was experiencing. Today, you're going to hear from Dr. Roseann Capanna-Hodge, a leading expert in emotional and behavioral dysregulation with over 30 years of experience helping families move from chaos to calm. She was one of our speakers at last year's summit and breaks this down in a way that brings so much clarity and so much hope. I want us to jump into this conversation, and as you're listening, you might start to recognize pieces of your own child in this. And that's exactly why I'm so excited about something coming up that I'll share more about in just a bit. Can you explain what rejection sensitive dysphoria is, and maybe why it's so common among neurodivergent kids?
Yeah. So, what they call it RSD. So we're going to call it RSD to make our life so much
Very good.
So it's not technically a clinical disorder. And just understand, Jamie and I are both licensed professionals, mental health professionals, right? And so we use a book called the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. And basically, in order for something to be diagnosable, it needs to be in there. So what it is it's a phrase, it's a clinical issue that I believe that it's present in a lot of other conditions. And it's when you have intense emotional reactions to real or perceived, and let's put perceived in the parking lot because you need to hear that, criticism, rejection, or failure, right? And these are kids, when you think about them, they have zero stress tolerance. They ignite quickly and they run hot, as I like to say. They go into the red easily, and they leave parents very perplexed, because when you have a real stressor, right? Your brother came up to you and whacked you in the head, and then you have a big reaction, you get it. But the perceived part of things is really tricky and hard for not just parents, but educators too, Jamie. They're like, why? And here's what I'm going to say. The why is nervous system dysregulation. These are kids that their nervous system is activating, and we can go into all the reasons why. And so they're just more prone to dysregulation, more episodes of, big emotions, big reactions, and really also very poor recovery. These are kids that get upset, flash too quickly, but stay angry sometimes, for 30 minutes, an hour, hours or more.
And this right here, this is exactly why I created something that I'm so excited to share with you. Because if you're listening and thinking, this is my child, this is what we're dealing with, I want you to know you're not alone. And there is more support coming. I'm hosting a free online event called Calm in the Chaos. Real tools for raising an emotionally intense or neurodivergent child. And it's designed to help you understand what's really going on beneath those big reactions, so you can feel more confident, more calm, and more connected as a parent. Registration is now open, so make sure you head over to the website, calmconnectionparenting.org, or join us inside the Calm Connection Parenting Facebook group so you can get that special link to register for this exciting event. That's right, calmconnectionparenting.org. And when you register, you're going to want to make sure you get into that Facebook group, Calm Connection Parenting Facebook group. So if this is something that is resonating with you, you are not going to want to miss this very special online event. Let's get back to our conversation with Dr. Rosanna.
Right.
And that's really hard for people to deal with when somebody's stuck.
That's right. Well, tell us this. How can parents and educators spot the signs of RSD?
Yeah. So, and just to know like where it occurs. So about 70% of kids with ADHD have RSD. They have rejection sensitive dysphoria, so they react too strongly. That's a lot. I mean, that is our number one behavioral, I hate to say disorder, but it's, so it's much more prevalent in neurodivergence, individuals with neurodivergence, clinical issues. So what are signs, right? So first of all, you don't need a clinical diagnosis, okay? Like, even though I spent 22 years doing neuropsych testing, I really want you to reframe clinical issues as nervous system dysregulation and signs of over and understimulation. But what are signs? So these are kids on the obvious. They have a low frustration tolerance. So maybe they are, they got an answer wrong, right? On a piece of paper, and they rip it up, right? That's a big overreaction. So their size of their problem is the size of an ant, but their reaction is that, the big elephant, right?
That's right.
Overreactions, just seemingly simple frustrations. That's a sign. The other thing is that this happens a lot. This isn't like all kids do this, just so you know. Like, I have a kid who gets overstimulated. I have a kid who has a learning disability, so gets understimulated. So I got the spectrum, and I've been around thousands of kids. So it's perfectly normal for kids to dysregulate. Okay. It happens, but is it happening with frequency? And is it happening with such an intensity and for a long time? That's what we really want to see. So that low frustration point, big reaction, maybe tears, almost sometimes kids with RSD at times can almost feel paranoid because they get stuck on things. And then they just are like, well, that other kid doesn't like me, you know, and they'll really get stuck. So
recess issues or not getting called on in the classroom, are those times we might notice that?
Yes, absolutely. And lots of friction with others, right? This is a kid that has a lot of conflict. And these are kids too. There's a lot of overlap with RSD and mood disorders. And I think mood disorders really get missed. I mean, I did an intake this morning and, you know, they were like, my kid's got ADHD and I do something called a QEEG brain map so I can look at their brain. And I was like, this is not an ADD brain. This is a mood disorder brain. And the parents were really getting spun and hung up. And I said, stop. He's a moody kid. And they were like, he's a moody kid. And I was like, we can work with that. We don't need a diagnosis. We just need to know he's moody and has been his entire life from the get-go. So the kids with RSD, by the way, they often are like this. People will say, oh, they were always tough. You know, I didn't know they were so tough until I had a sibling, right? He had a sibling. You know, if your child has a severe change in behavior, you really got to look at why that's happening. Maybe there's bullying. Maybe the school works too hard. Maybe you and your husband are screaming at each other and or maybe not talking to each other at all. Maybe there's something causing a situational stressor is what we call it. You want to look, or maybe that this is a kid had infection and toxin and has PANS or PANDAS. So that can cause, it's a clinical issue where an infection or toxin can cause a misdirected immune response and you have neuroinflammation. And that can lead to a change in behavior. So RSD kids are not sudden changes in behaviors. These are kids that people would use words, these are not my words, but grumpy, easily set off. Easily irritated, hard to get along with. I want you to reframe that. And I want you to say, this is a kid that is his or her nervous system is dysregulating. Yeah. And so they easily get irritated and they might lash out more easily because they don't know what else to do.
So is this, when you talk about emotional dysregulation as the root, not the symptom, is this what you're referring to?
So emotional dysregulation is a sign. What I'm actually talking about is nervous system dysregulation. So like just nervous system 101, every parent should know about you know, brain and body basics. We have something called the autonomic nervous system, ANS. It controls our stress response. Everybody's got it. It should be working, right? So when we get stressed, we move from a relaxed baseline state. It should be in parasympathetic. I call that the hot tub state, nice and super relaxed. It should activate, right? So real life story, like a week ago, a couple, I had a really scary situation and my nervous system went from parasympathetic to sympathetic dominant. And all it was, this is what happens in the Northeast, people are very aggressive. I went to park and I moved from one parking spot to the other very gently. And this couple freaked out on me and said I almost killed them. They weren't even in there as they were walking into the liquor store at 10 a.m. But they were so aggressive that if I didn't pull myself in, it literally, they were going to aggress towards me. I'm a good judge of these things. So what happened to my body, right? This is a dramatic example, but I went into a sympathetic dominant state. I actually had to do a lot of work to calm myself down. Now, when you think of this with your kid, you're like, what is my kid so activated from? It's compounded stressors. So maybe you're a kid who needs a lot of correction, right? Right. You know, get started here. Keep your hands to yourself, Amy. Move over, you know, stop, you know. That causes such an activation and you start moving and moving. Maybe you have a kid with sensory processing disorder. Maybe you have a kid with autism. Who knows? But your nervous system is more prone to activation from a variety of things, food intolerances, stressors of all kinds are a huge list, way more than you think, way more than those crazy people, you know, who were super dysregulated in the parking lot, right? Right. So when parents start to reframe, right? So the nervous system starts living in a sympathetic dominant state. What I think most people don't know is there's really only a few outcomes when you really start going to the highest levels of sympathetic dominance. It's fight, flight, or freeze. Now they have fawn, which means you're so activated, you're just going to do the right thing all the time. That doesn't happen a lot, right? But basically you shut down, you get angry, or you run. And so that's a biological response. And so the reframing that I want people to really think about is that what are all those things that are causing your kid to activate? What happens with RSD kids is they're not just living in sympathetic dominant. So like a sound will set them off, not being able to sit in the front seat of your car, your sister, humming, like anything. Is that they don't know what else to do. They lack coping skills. They lack the ability to regulate. And so, the base of my work is regulate, then treat. Okay.
Right.
Because nothing is going to stick until we regulate. And it's not just the kid, it's the parents.
Oh, I knew you were going to say that because that's really key. And I think it's oftentimes forgotten. Very good.
Also, parents don't know that power of that.
Right.
They have no idea how ridiculously powerful that is because we're not giving parents that, right? Like I say all the time, you get a kid and they send you home with it. You spend so much time on preparing for the birth.
Right.
And they send you home and you're like, what do I do with this thing?
Right. And then
I love how Dr. Rosanna shares that. And parenting can be tough. It is one of the biggest challenges, but also one of the biggest blessings, but we don't get preparation for it. And so when you get an emotionally intense or high need child, you probably are going to need more support, more tools, more resources, maybe even extra encouragement for that journey. And I love how she explains that powerful shift where we can go from thinking your child is overreacting or taking things too personally to understanding that their nervous system may actually be experiencing things more intensely than other kids. And that truly changes everything. And the truth is, we really just scratched the surface of this conversation. We had probably 25 more minutes of conversation with Dr. Roseann Capanna-Hodge. And there is so much more to understanding emotional dysregulation, rejection sensitive dysphoria, and what your child really needs in those moments. And even though RSD isn't something that we hear a lot about, we are growing in awareness of it because honestly, people who have ADHD or mood disorders talk about rejection sensitive dysphoria being one of the most debilitating aspects of those diagnoses, something that impacts them more than a lot of the things that we are talking about. So if you have not explored this yet in understanding your child, or maybe even yourself or your spouse, or other people you come across, you might really find it helpful. And that's why I'm giving you a special invitation to the Calm in the Chaos, Real Tools for Raising Emotionally Intense or Neurodivergent Children. This is the free online parenting summit where we're bringing together 20 experts who truly understand what's going on beneath the behavior so that you can make sense of those big emotional reactions, feel more confident in how you respond, and start creating more calm and connection in your home. And if this episode has you thinking, this is my child, this explains so much, then you're absolutely going to want to be a part of this. We have opened registration. That's right, the doors are open. So go to calmconnectionparenting.org and follow the link to register. And be sure to join us inside the Calm Connection Parenting Facebook group. You can find the link to register there, and that is where all of the summit stuff is going to be held. We're going to be continuing these conversations in that group, and I want you to know that if you're ready to go even deeper right now as you prepare for the summit, you can also grab access to last year's summit library and hear this full conversation with Dr. Rosanna, along with so many others just like it. The few weeks prior, we've covered some of the other speakers, Leslie Josell, Kirk Martin, Penny Williams. And you're going to love these sessions. They offered so many great tips and just encouragement. So I want you to remember this. You're not alone in this journey, and there is a path forward. I hope to see you over there in the Facebook group, and I hope to see you at the summit. Go to calmconnectionparenting.org and the link in the show notes to get your seat now. Keep on keeping on. I hope today's episode gave you a breath of fresh air, maybe a bit of hope too. If this encouraged you, would you please take a moment to follow and leave a quick review? It helps this much-needed message of calm and connection reach more families. And if you're looking for additional resources, be sure to visit calmconnectionparenting.org and check out the podcast tab. There you'll find a variety of free resources waiting just for you. Until next week's episode, take a deep breath, grab that fresh cup of coffee, and remember, you've got this. And on the days you don't, well, we're in it together.